was bought with mercy and grace. Come, let us bow down. In his hands are the depths of the earth. With one voice we proclaim his great worth. Lord our God, and we will seek him, our rock of salvation. Morning by morning, with thanksgiving we come, and we will bow down. With creation we cry out. In daylight and darkness, we sing to the Lord. And great is our God. And great is our God. And great is our God. Lord of all nations, we will stand at the end of our days in your courts and declare your great ways in spirit and truth. We long for your kingdom. Bring your thunder and gather the earth. All who tremble will tell of your word. Lord our God, and we will seek him, our rock of salvation. Morning by morning, with thanksgiving we come, and we will bow down. With creation we cry out. In daylight and darkness, we sing to the Lord, and we will seek him, our rock of salvation. Morning by morning, with thanksgiving we come, and we will bow down. With creation we cry out. In daylight and darkness, we sing to the Lord. Great is our God. We sing, great is our God. Great is our God. Great is our God. We sing, great is our God. Oh, great is our God. Great is our
Passion always needs a maker, and babe, you've been mine. Dress it up with lace and layers, and then you'll be fine. Seen the way the world can shake you, but don't let it break you. I need your skin and bones like shelter to keep me alive. Keep me alive. Take me back to the big sky. Take me back to the reasons why I'm lost without you. With you I'm fireproof. Take me back to your between the dreaming that we once created. Hiding out behind the walls, now you're keeping me locked out. Wait around for you to run out, don't leave me behind. Don't leave me behind. Take me back to the big sky. Take me back to the reasons why I'm lost without you. With you I'm fireproof. Take me back to your brighter side. Take me back to the big sky. Take me back to the reasons why I'm lost without you. With you I'm fireproof. Take me back to your brighter side.
One night to be confused, one night to speed up truth. We had a promise made, 4 hands and then away. Both under influence, we had divine sense to know what to say. Mind is a razor blade to call for hands of above, to lean on. Would it be good enough for me now? One night of magic rush, the start a simple touch. One night to push and scream, and then relief. 10 days of perfect tunes, the colors red and blue. We had a promise made, we were in love. To call for hands of above, to lean on. Would it be good enough for me now? To call for hands of above, to lean on. Would it be good enough? And you knew the hand of the devil, and you kept us awake with false teeth, sharing different heartbeats in one life. To call for hands of above, to lean on. Would it be good enough for me now? To call for hands of above, to lean on. Would it be good enough?
Well, hello once again and welcome to Harbour. Really should change that countdown music at some point. Or maybe not. It's sort of become iconic now, hasn't it? The great countdown. So you're very welcome, whether this is your first time, second time, or 333rd time here on our live streams. Special welcome, as I say, if you are new. I'm thinking of Sheila O'Neill, who just recently joined the Harbour virtual Facebook group, and Brian welcomed her the other day. So welcome to you, Sheila. Special welcome to Fiona McGreevy as well, who joined us for the very first time last Sunday, and she sent us a message saying that she really enjoyed being part of things. So we're very glad to welcome you aboard at Harbour, Fiona. And another special welcome, of course, most of you will know that Brian Ammons and Gareth Higgins have now arrived safely on the shores with us here in Northern Ireland. They are living in Hollywood, just across the loch from us at the moment, here in Carrick. So they've come all the way from North Carolina, South Carolina, Ashford anyway, and they'll be here for the next 12 months or so. So very special and warm welcome to those two. Brian, as many of you will know, is taking on a voluntary role with us at Harbour. He will be especially working with those who are connecting with Harbour from a distance, who are geographically separated, who are new. And so he's what we are calling our chaplain to the Friends of Harbour network. So that's a role he's just starting to take on, and you'll see more from him in the coming weeks and months. Another special welcome to Kathy Crawford. I just saw there on the live chat. I think you said you're joining us from the City Hospital Cancer Centre. So you're in a hospital bed at the moment. Really sorry to hear that, Kathy, but a very big welcome to you nonetheless. We wish you all the love and grace and peace in the world. So we all have arrived in the same virtual harbour this morning. But of course, we've arrived here on different ships. We're not all on the same boat. Some of the boats that have just dropped anchor right now here in harbour are full of holes and they're leaking, and they've just about limped to the quayside and are throwing on the ropes to tie ashore. I don't know what the words are. Others are doing fine, and the ship's solid, and they're laden with goods and supplies and are riding out the lockdown easily enough. We're all at different extremes, but however you've arrived here, whatever your ship is like at the moment, whether it's taking on water or whether it's fine and dandy, you're all very welcome. So of course, one thing that unites us is our capacity to sing together. So here's Amazing Grace. I pressed that button too soon and jumped the gun. So as I was saying, here's Amazing Grace, that's come to us from across different countries across the world during lockdown.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. 我最意的赦免。
Fui ciego, mas hoy miro yo.
Perdutor salvo soy.
Let moon shine.
at me. Ich war verloren, ganz laut erschrecken.
So we are, of course, all brought together by amazing grace. I meant to say earlier on a special welcome to Bernie Sanders as well, who's obviously joined us for the morning. I think he could look a little more enthusiastic, but that's Bernie. Anyway, we are a community that's quite diverse as a church, as I'm sure many of you are getting to know. It's not just me, of course, and even though I'm the face that you see most of the time on the live stream, that's just because I'm curating and trying to pull all our voices together and trying to provide something of a constant signal. But we are obviously way more diverse than just me. And so I regularly ask the Harbour community for submissions for these live streams. So they can be music, they can be prayers, they could be something you've read that's just struck a chord with you or taught you something and you just want to share it. It just could be community news, things that are going on in your life, anything like that at all. And I would very much welcome anything like that to contribute to these moments. And so we are welcoming Ruth Johnson, who would like to share something with us this morning, which will lead straight into our invocation for the morning.
I suppose, like a lot of people, since the lockdown began, I've been walking a lot more than I normally would have. And it's my aim to walk the marathon this year, but that's another thing. Walking has become my real lifeline for the last year, and I've totally fallen in love again with Carrickfergus. I love that we live near the water and that I can get to the water very quickly, and I particularly love getting down there very early in the morning. This photograph was taken probably about 7:30 in the morning. What really fascinated me one day is that I was walking by those bins with another girl, and we were walking and she was telling me what was happening in front of me because I couldn't believe it. Basically, one of the council guys, or road sweeper, was emptying the bins with his hands. He had the cart at the side of the bins. He was emptying the bins with his hands, taking out all the dirty hamburgers and bits of pizza, leftover food, chips, and he was throwing it to a flock of 30 plus seagulls, I'm not joking, around him. And I saw this happen on 2 occasions, just after 7 in the morning, and she was telling me that he does this every day. He's on duty, goes to the bins, takes out the food and feeds the seagulls, and then tidies up the mess. And it really shocked my senses or something. I don't know what it did to me. At first I looked at it and I went, that's disgusting, because he was doing it with his bare hands. And then I had a wee, well, it's quite nice actually, because that food will all be wasted and the birds need fed. And then I thought, look at you, Ruth, judging somebody feeding seagulls when I feed birds in my garden every day, and it's okay to feed them, robins and starlings and all the tiny wee birds that come to our feeder, but it's not okay for that man to feed the seagulls with the leftover food. And it got me really thinking how judgmental we can be sometimes, and how judgmental we've even become in this pandemic about vaccines, about COVID, and people's opinions about this and that. And the words of Cesar, a guy who was pastor at our church about 20 years ago for a year, he was from Brazil, and he used to say, it's better to love than be right. And I suppose his words ring in my ears sometimes, because it's better to love them be right. I used to have a wee poem when I worked in the church office at the side of my desk. It said, God, keep your arm around my shoulders and your hand over my mouth. And I really need that. But it is better to love.
Blessed are the merciful, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Mercy. Forgive us as we forgive those who sin against us. Forgive us as we forgive those who sin against us. Lord, have mercy on us, show your mercy through us, Lord. Have mercy on us, show your mercy through us, Lord. Have mercy on us, show your mercy through us, mercy.
So thank you for that submission, Ruth. And like I said, if there's anything that's inspiring you through the week, anything you'd like to share, what's going on in your life, a song you'd like to play or perform, this community is an outlet for that. So by all means, send me any submissions and I'll work them in to our experience together. I see there that Anne Shields wants Bernie back up for some reason. So just for you, Anne, there's Bernie. I think you want to take a picture of him, so you've got about 5 seconds before he disappears off screen again, because nobody wants that guy sitting in the corner looking like that. I mean, is he enjoying the service? Isn't he? It's hard to tell. He's socially distant. Anyway, that enough, Anne? See you, Bernie. So yes, I've got buttons. I can do all sorts of things. I can even do this. But there's no need to go there. So I'll try not to use that trigger unless absolutely necessary. Is Rickrolling still a thing? I don't know. Can you Rickroll your church congregation? Well, it's just been done. Anyway, it is now time for our community, what I'm now calling Grace and Peace Hymnal, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's where we turn to our hymnals and we engage with an old hymn whilst saying the words grace and peace to each other. So these are words that don't come from just me, they are words we say to each other. So if you can turn to page 426 in your hymn books, and we will sing together hymn number 118.
Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me.
The word abide is sort of an old-fashioned word. We don't tend to use it very much. And even if we do, it's kind of in a negative way, isn't it? Like, I can't abide that person, or I can't abide something. It's usually something a bit negative. But of course, the word abide just means remain. So if you directly translate it, it means remain or wait, actually. It's basically a call to just slow down for a second. Right? Just stop so we take the moment in. Let us not rush through this. Instead, let's wait, let's remain and see what happens. And I think that's an important call to us today. One of the most frustrating things, I think, for many of us to see during this lockdown is how much it's affecting kids and their education and what's expected of them and all the anxiety that goes with that, because there's this constant worry, it seems, or social anxiety that unless we keep our children up to speed with this conveyor belt, they'll be left behind, you know. There's this fear we don't want them left behind, or we don't want us left behind. But of course, the question is, left behind who? And instead of worrying and being so anxious about this machine that just pushes all of us forward on this endless conveyor belt towards who knows whatever carrot is dangling at the end of the education process, instead of that, can't we just wait? Instead of saying, you have to keep up, kids, your education has to keep up, otherwise you'll be left behind. Instead of saying that, can't we say, look, don't worry, things are rough right now, but we're all going to wait for you. We seem to have forgotten that as a culture, as a society, we can decide how we want to be, and we don't need to let something just take a life of its own and draw us all somewhere where we don't want to go. But in order for that to happen, we need to learn what it means to abide, to remain, to not let the juggernaut and this momentum just carry us forward without us thinking or being reflective about it. And that takes prayer, actually. It takes a genuine call from our hearts to God's heart to say, help us remain. Before we all get carried away towards a destination that none of us really thinks is healthy, help us to slow, help us to pause, help us to abide. And so this is a prayer for you. If you just think that things need to slow down, if you just need things to slow down for you, I mean, in a way, we've all been slowed down right now. But if you think things need to slow down even more, so you can take a breath, so we can collectively take a breath and think about the kinds of future we actually want for our kids and for us and for what matters for all of us as a community, then this is a prayer for God to help us slow down.
Slow me down, oh Lord, slow me down. Help my heart to hear your sound. Speak into my life, Lord, speak now. Slow me down, oh Lord, slow me down. Clear my mind, oh Lord, clear my mind. Bring me peace that I cannot find. Take my worried thoughts, break my pride. Clear my mind, oh Lord, clear my mind. Wake my soul, oh Lord, wake my soul. With this mess I've made, make me whole. Of this life called mine, take control. Wake my soul, oh Lord, wake my soul. Help my heart to hear your sound, speak into my life, Lord, speak now. Slow me down, oh Lord, slow me down. Slow me down, oh Lord, slow me down. Slow me down, oh Lord, slow me down.
So that's our prayer, that if we are going to see a possible better future or imagine a better future that God has for us as his people, as his children whom he loves, then we need to go slower, be more reflective, and allow that inspiration and that imagination to come. We are going to reflect now on the reading that's set for today. So if you remember, last week we practiced this lament, is what it's called. And lament doesn't mean just being sad. It means taking grief and sadness and putting it into a context that's workable and intentional, so that it doesn't overtake us, but that we handle it well as a faith community. And the frame that we looked at lamenting through, obviously, is the lockdown and everything we're going through right now. But specifically, we reflected on Israel's journey through the exile, because that's one of the most traumatic moments in their history. Like, we have BC and AD, we kind of split time based on before the Common Era and the Common Era, and the birth of Jesus or the life of Jesus tends to be that dividing line. But for them, it was the moment of exile, the Babylonian captivity, when the population of the Israel nation was decimated, and all their best and brightest were taken into servitude, into captivity, and their livestock destroyed and their lands destroyed and the temple itself sacked. All of that was the most catastrophic moment in living memory. And so we reflected on what that meant at the time, and how, as they were led into captivity, these Israelites who were being forcibly relocated to a foreign land refused to sing, and they hung up their harps and they sat down by the rivers of Babylon, we're told, which is the Euphrates River probably, and they lamented there, and they refused to be made to sing, because that's not how they were feeling. And it's really honest, the story. But we take another turn now, because the lectionary actually is set today. The Old Testament passage is set in Jonah. Okay, so it's the story of Jonah, and Karen Pauly is going to read it to us now, the passage that's set. But just before she does, I want to give you a bit of background. You probably know the story of Jonah, but it centers around the city Nineveh. Now, just to put that in context, Nineveh was the Assyrian capital city at the time, the enemy, right? The boogeyman, basically, in the psyche of the Israeli nation. This is the city that held the kings and the foreign religion that took them from their land, right? This is the capital city that inflicted this suffering on their nation. So a much hated adversary, foe of Israel is this Assyrian Babylonian nation, and Nineveh is its capital. At the time, it was the largest populated city on the planet for about 50 years. And so it's hard to really sense the amount of hatred towards this enemy that had done so much harm to them in their perception. And Jonah is invited by God, right, to go and preach to this city, to preach repentance to it. And Jonah suspects that this means that God is going to relent from punishing the city. And so he doesn't want any part of it. And this is why he runs away. He doesn't want to be involved in this. And the most we tend to know about the story of Jonah is that there's this big whale that swallows him. And as a kid in Sunday school, probably all you learn is, well, you better do what God says, or else you might get swallowed by a fish, something bad might happen. Of course, that's completely forgetting the point that the fish in the story, the whale that swallows Jonah, is sent to rescue Jonah. We're said the text says that God provides a fish to swallow Jonah because he had been thrown overboard from this ship in a storm by the rest of the crew, presumably because he just wasn't singing his part in the sea shanty. So they just chucked him overboard, and God sends this whale. No, that wasn't the reason, obviously. And this whale to rescue Jonah and bring him ashore. And this is where Karen Pauly is going to pick up the reading. So it's in Jonah chapter 3, and she's going to read what happens next. So after Jonah has attempted to bypass this calling that he believes God has for him and has been brought back, roughly, if you like, by this intervention, however you want to visualize that, of this whale. And now is the moment where Karen is reading from.
A reading from Jonah chapter 3, verses 1 to 5 and verse 10. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, Get up, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it the message that I tell you. So Jonah set out and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly large city, a 3-day walk across. Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's walk, and he cried out, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast, and everyone, great and small, put on sackcloth. When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil ways, God changed his mind about the calamity that he said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it.
So you can see that Jonah here reluctantly goes to this city, and he doesn't really want them to repent, or he doesn't want them to be forgiven by God. And so he doesn't even say, look, here's your way out of your punishment. Jonah just says, God's going to destroy you. Because that's what Jonah wants. It's what everybody in Israel wanted at the time. If you read the prophet Nahum, who's a contemporary of Jonah, a similar sized book in the Bible, an Old Testament prophet, it's just chapter after chapter of Nineveh is going to be destroyed. God's going to decimate that place. God's going to pay them back for what they did to us, And it has this ring of karma to it. They're going to get what's coming to them. It's funny when you think about karma, if you in your head probably that karma is this idea of balance, this Eastern idea of balance, that you do something wrong and something bad happens to you, you do something good and something good happens to you. It's this balance. But if you actually think about it, whenever someone says karma is going to get them, we usually mean that the negative thing's going to happen, right? It's stuff like if you look up instant karma videos, for example, on YouTube, you're going to see stuff like this. It's the classic, you try to hurt someone, but you got hurt yourself, or the car runs a red light and the police car catches them, and you're like, there you go, instant justice. There's karma for you. And we have this thing that justice mainly means people getting the punishment they deserve. And you very rarely see when people talk about karma, if you click a instant karma link on YouTube, it's not going to be somebody doing something good and then getting an instant reward. It's probably going to be someone having something bad happen to them, because that's the bit we're obsessed with. That's the bit we need, is to see people punished. That's really in us. And when people say, when Christians especially say, yes, God is love, but God's also just, what they mean is, don't mess. Yeah, God's loving, but he also carries a stick. There's never the sense of actual equality or love or goodness coming in their version of justice. It's always this kind of karma, they need to get what's coming. And this is consistent actually with what you can understand the Jewish people believed at the time, or desired, was that God was going to punish this city because they can't just get away with it. Right? If there's any justice in the world, God's not going to turn a blind eye. God's not going to let them just walk all over us. If God is God, then surely they're going to get what's coming. That they have to. And so this is reflected in their prophecies, in their writings. And by the way, just to say something about prophecies and prophets, when we read prophets, we tend to think of them as people who predict stuff that's going to happen. And of course, that's not what a biblical prophet was. A prophet was someone who reflected on who God was as they believed, looked at the way that their community was interacting with God and justice and different cities and geopolitical events, and then spoke into those situations, usually in such a way that really upset a lot of people in power. But sometimes the prophets went along with the people in power. And when the people in power were saying, we're going to get that city back, you had prophets coming along saying, yep, and God's on your side. And you can sense this whole tribal feel. And those were the prophecies people wanted to hear. Nahum saying, God's going to absolutely destroy our enemy, our old foe. But of course, the story of Jonah tells us the opposite. God doesn't destroy the old enemy. In fact, God forgives, and the enemy doesn't get the karma, the justice that everyone was expecting. And you can understand why Jonah wants no part of this. Because think of it for a second. What is Jonah afraid of? Why did Jonah run? We assume that he's afraid of that city, of his enemies killing him or whatever, but of course that's not the case. Jonah was afraid of his own people, how they would react to him being the one to broker a kind of peace or a lack of punishment towards their old enemies. Everybody wants punishment to come, but Jonah now is interpreting things differently. See, when you read about a prophet receiving the word of God or the word of God coming to a prophet, that doesn't mean that they heard this audible voice speaking in their heads. It means that they interpret their surroundings and the way things are happening and come to a conclusion. And sometimes that isn't even something that synchronizes with their own heart. Jonah himself wants to see Nineveh punished, but he suspects that God doesn't. And that's a fascinating tension there. I was watching something on TV last night, and they talked about one of these machines. This machine is, of course, called a fancy machine that optometrists use. I don't know its name. Is it a phoropter or something like that? I get rid of that. It's the machine that they put all the slots and the lenses onto your eyes, and you're just meant to have those put over your eyes, and then the optometrist asks, is this better or worse? If I put this lens in, do things look clearer or do they look more blurred? And over a process of changing lenses, you eventually come up with a prescription that suits your eyes. And I think that the Bible gives us a set of lenses. The Bible works a bit like this. It's one of those machines with all these lenses and all these prophets and writers who say different things about God, who have different experiences with God. And we're invited to look through each of them and say, do things look clearer or more blurry now, right? For example, let me just show you how these two ideas clash. So look at the first quote. This is straight out of Nahum chapter 1. Like I said, this is the prophet who wants to agree with his people who want to see Nineveh punished. He says, in his interpretation of God, the word of the Lord coming to him, God will make an end of Nineveh. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished, right? So there it is, black and white, the word of the Lord. Jonah 3, the bit that Karen Pauly just read, says God changed his mind about the calamity he had said he would bring upon Nineveh, and he did not do it. So which one's right? Those two verses, you put them side by side, those two passages, they can't both be the same. Either God is going to not relent and definitely punish people for what they've done, or God is likely to relent and not punish. And of course, those are both just two different lenses. If you have been the victim of oppression, if you have seen your lands taken away and your nation destroyed, and they're the people that did it, you need to think about a God who's going to bring justice. And justice needs to be about that kind of punishment. And so there's a lens that Nahum produces. However, you can't just look through that one by itself, because you'll get a blurry image of God. You have to then click Jonah over that too and look through them both together and say, but what happens if God doesn't? Right? And this is where Jonah doesn't want to go. What happens if God relents? What happens if God's more interested in rehabilitation? What happens if God wants to bring everyone, even your enemies, onto the same place and care for us all? Well, that's now a more advanced step, but the picture becomes clearer. And so as followers of Christ, we are all trying to see more clearly But we don't all get the same prescription, right? If you take off your glasses and give them to someone and say, there you go, just look through these. They work for me, so they'll work for you. Obviously they won't. The person, in fact's vision could be worse. And this is what happens sometimes, I think, when people look at the Bible. They say, because for them, they've put on one of the lenses that really matches their experience. And they're like, well, that's what God's like. God's going to punish our enemies. See, it says in Nahum, and they put it on you. And you're like, but that doesn't make any sense because Jonah, and now it's blurry. And so we engage with the Bible like one of those machines, put on multiple lenses and ask, does our picture of God seem clearer now or more blurry? And the way we can tell, for a person of a Christian faith anyway, is using Christ. So Jesus is the ultimate representation of what God is like. And so the question is, does this seem more Christ-like, right? Rather than is it blurry or clearer, it's is this more Christ-like? And so we can use Christ to guide us. And there's that example, for example, where the disciples and Jesus are walking through this Samaritan land, and the Samaritan village doesn't want to let them in, so they have to go the long way around. And the disciples say to Jesus, hey, should we call down fire and brimstone and destroy that city? And that's straight from Nahum. That lens matches what they want to see happen because they're angry, right? And they want that city to get what's coming. But then Jesus says, guys, you don't know what spirit you are of. And there's the other lens. And so Jesus guides us towards love of enemy and relenting. That's more Jonah than Nahum. But we don't want to lose the kind of sense that, well, surely God's not going to turn a blind eye to everything. God must be there to help things and justice come eventually. And yes, that's kind of reflected in Nahum, but it's not the whole story. And so you see these overlapping stories, and no one of them really is accurate in and of itself. It's not right to say that God just turns a blind eye to everything, like in Jonah. And it's not right to say that God's going to wipe everyone out who opposes him, like in Nahum. What's right to say is that there's an image of God that's been emerging over time through all of us, through all of God's people. And as we flick on those lenses, we start to see more clearly. But that takes time and persistence and a willingness to sit in that chair and say, I'm going to read this, I'm going to read this. And you know what? You have to go back for another test every year, don't you? Because we get older and more things come into our field of vision and our eyes start to deteriorate. And so we have to look again at a new lens. And that's all very healthy. Now, people will say, oh, God changes not. God never changes. He must be just like Nahum. And that may well be true. But we definitely do change. Our prejudices go back and forth. The things that hurt us and scar us change. And so we have to be willing to submit ourselves to that process of looking through other people's lenses and realizing that just wearing one of those lenses will make us see less well, actually. We're trying to look through them all one by one and working out, what is it that God wants me to see? Even when, just as for Jonah, as Jonah suspects, it's not going to be what he wants to see. And that's how you know this integrity, actually. Because if your view of God suddenly lines up with what you want to happen, you should be suspicious. But with Jonah's view of God, who's like, I knew God was going to do this. I knew you were going to forgive those people. And that's not what Jonah wants. And yet that's how he believes God is. There's this old saying about this guy who was asked, are you a universalist? Are you a universalist? And he's like, well, no, I'm not, but I think God might be. And you see, people say things like that to me or to Harbour, oh, you're so inclusive and you're just so welcoming. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to be and we're trying to be, but it's not that we are, it's that we think God is, right? It's as we put those lenses on, yes, we see the other more exclusive tribal lenses. We note them, they're there, but as we filter through the other lenses, we're starting to see God more clearly. And it isn't even, I know for me, something I wanted to see. I come from a very different place. I used to have a pair of glasses that fitted fine, thank you very much, and used to make sense of the world, but started to get blurry. And so that's why the scriptures are much, much better understood as a complex layer of lenses rather than an instruction book, right? If it were an instruction book, that's just like saying all you have to do is put on these glasses and you'll see. But of course, you could see worse. Anyway, something is happening for Jonah and for the community that Jonah represents that's really, really pivotal in this book. And it's kept in the scriptures for all of the faith community to see. And it's really, really hard to let go of one version of God that you've had for a long time. The thing is, though, one of the ways that you can know that the version of God that you're seeing is blurred or malformed is just a sense of inertia. It may not be a big calamity, but something in your life may just feel like it's gone flat. Sailors used to speak of the doldrums. I know we've entered into the natural sea shanty phase that every lockdown goes through, and there are sea shanties everywhere, including on our last live stream. But one of the things that sailors were really wary of was something called the doldrums. You've heard this, I'm just in the doldrums. That was an actual geographical place. It's called the something convergence zone. It's where the air pressure and winds were converged in such a way that there was almost no wind at all, just dead calm. And for a sailing ship, that was potentially deadly. For Jonah, there's a storm that rocks the ship backwards and forwards, and that sometimes is what causes change, and they chuck him overboard, right? And that was something that sailors would have been afraid of. But equally so, sailors feared the doldrums. That place where it's a flat calm and your sails don't pick anything up. Because if you're there in the doldrums, you can't go anywhere and your supplies start to run low. You might know exactly what that's like. You're not going anywhere, and initially that's okay. But as you run through your supplies, you start to feel, I'm becoming anemic. My spiritual life's sinking. And that would be a slow and painful death, really, for sailors. And so whenever you were in a place like that, where the winds stopped, and the wind's not blowing anymore, and everything's gone flat, you needed to abandon ship. It's time to say goodbye, and time to harness the new wind. I like that there's a sea shanty-ish song that reflects this. And I want you just to listen to it and ask yourself, is it time to leave behind an old view of God that's left you adrift and vulnerable to malnutrition and scurvy and that isn't driving you anywhere good? The call is that you may need to leave. So as you listen to these words, the phrase Johnny here is the phrase for a sailor in general, or a sailor's crew. And when the shanty is talking about leaving her, it means leaving the ship because the winds aren't blowing anymore. And so just use this moment as a kind of a meditation to ask yourself, as you're in harbour now, before you're about to go back out to sea, what is that sea like for you? Your environment, is it pushing you and nurturing you, or has it just become that sort of doldrum where there's nothing blowing? And it may be time to leave that view of God behind, leave behind the Nahum view that wants to see others punished and get what they deserve, and grab onto the Jonah view, which is more upsetting, but also more invigorating, where God says, actually, I'm about restoration for everyone. So here we are, our next sea shanty.
Oh, the times were hard and the wages low. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. I guess it's time for us to go, and it's time for us to leave her. Beware these packet ships, I say. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. They'll steal your stores and your clothes away, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. There's Liverpool Pat in his tarpaulin hat. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. And Yankee John, the pocket rat. And it's time for us to leave her. She would not wear and she would not stay. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. She shipped great seas both night and day, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
It's rotten beef and weevilly bread. It was pumped around, the old man said, and it's time for us to leave her. The sails all furled, our work is done. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. And now ashore we'll take our run, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
So the song is about sailors who've become attached to a ship, and it's been a part of their life for so long, but they need to leave it. It's run its course. There's just rotten meat because there's no winds taking the boat anywhere, and it's the winds aren't blowing. The voyage is done. And sometimes I think we can become really attached to a certain view of God, and we know it's not healthy for us, and we know that it's run its course because we're starting to see differently, and there are new lenses available to see, but it can be really, really hard to leave a voyage that you thought was going to take you somewhere. But you have to sometimes, as a person of faith, acknowledge, I'm stuck. The wind's not blowing. The food's gone rotten. I'm struggling. And it's hard, and it could have been hard because sailors could have just persisted because you become attached to your boat and your crew, and sometimes someone has to sing to you, leave. You need to leave. And I think there are plenty of people of faith, and myself included at times, where you just have to say, that isn't working. I'm going to set sail on a new course, jump ship, okay, whatever way you want to put it. Because there's a better view of God to be had. And it's not that the Bible has this one single view that it wants you to pick up on. It's not trying to show you something specific so much as it's trying to show you how to see clearly and then to perceive what's going on in your environment. Because you're not an ancient Israelite struggling with vengeance towards the old city of Nineveh. That's not your story. That was Jonah's. And he had to engage with that in a way that was scary for him, but also profoundly renewing. And so as you look around your life, look at the things that are scary for you, but that could be profoundly renewing. And it may require you to leave one view of God, one understanding of God, one community even that's become toxic for you, even though you're attached to it, to engage with God in a new way. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. I know some of you are thinking, would you stop with the sea shanties? But just remember, I've got a Rickroll button, so don't push your luck. Anyway, we've run out of time. There was a couple of other things I wanted to say, but I think I've made my point. I hope as you look forward to the weeks ahead, you're not filled with too much angst or a sense of sadness. Yes, things are strange and strained, but we are called to work together, to be adrift together, and to keep going. We don't know what's coming. We don't know what way the scene's going to change around us. But we have to learn how to see well, how our vision can be improved so that we can engage with the way things are now and the way things are going to be. And that's not always comfortable, but it's healthy. And it's an invitation to keep going. That's what it means to progress. And to be progressive just means to keep following wherever Christ is going, even if that's to difficult and painful places, even if that brings us at odds with the wider community, as it would have done with Jonah. Because in the end, Jonah's story was included by that same community. And now it serves as a constant reminder that you may want vengeance against your enemy, and you may even think that that's what God's going to give you. But you know what? God changes his mind. Isn't that a strange thing? That's really saying that we have just realized God isn't always the way we think. And so that's an invitation. May God bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, and give you peace and rest and comfort in the days that are ahead. And until next time, may we all lift together.
Flowing hard, the land we call our home. Push to keep the dark from coming. Feel the weight of what we owe. This, the songs of sons and daughters, hide the heart of who we are. Making peace to build our future. Strong, united, working till we fall. And we all live. And we're all adrift together, together. Through the cold mist, till we're lifeless, together, together. Sons and daughters, hide the heart of who we are. Making peace to build our future. Strong, united, working till we fall. The air and water flowing hard, the land we call our home. Push to keep the dark from coming. Feel the weight of what we owe. This, the songs of sons and daughters, hide the heart of who we are. Making peace to build our future. Strong, united, working till we fall. And we all lift, and we're all adrift together, together. Through the cold mist, till we're lifeless, together, together.
Salvation was bought with mercy and grace. Come, let us bow down. In His hands are the depths of the earth. With one voice we proclaim His great worth. Lord our God, and we will seek Him, our rock of salvation.
hearts and declare your great ways in spirit and truth. We long for your kingdom. Bring your thunder and gather the earth. All who tremble will tell of your word. Lord our God, and we will seek Him, our rock of salvation. Morning by morning, with thanksgiving we come, and we will bow down. With creation we cry out. In day and darkness, we sing to the Lord, and we will seek Him, our rock of salvation. Morning by morning, with thanksgiving we come, and we will bow down. With creation we cry out. In daylight and darkness, we sing to the Lord. Great is our God. We sing, great is our God. Great is our God. Great is our God. We sing, great is our God. Oh, great is our God. Great is our
Passion always needs a maker, and babe, you've been mine. Dress it up with lace and layers, and then you'll be fine. Seen the way the world can shake you, but don't let it break you. I need your skin and bones like shelter to keep me alive. Keep me alive. Take me back to the big sky. Take me back to the reasons why I'm lost without you. With you I'm fireproof. Take me back to your brighter side. Used to leave me captivated, but now I'm left waiting. Back and forth between the dreaming that we once created. Hiding out behind the walls, now you're keeping me locked out. Wait around for you to run out, don't leave me behind. Don't leave me behind. Take me back to the big sky. Take me back to the reasons why I'm lost without you. With you I'm fireproof. Take me back to your brighter side.
beat of truth. We had a promise made, 4 hands and then away, both under influence. We had divine sense to know what to say. Mind is a razor blade to call for hands of above, to lean on wouldn't be good enough for me now. One night of magic rush, the start a simple touch. One night to push and scream, and then relief. 10 days of perfect tunes, the colors red and blue. We had a promise made, we were in love, to call for hands of